Hey there, welcome into this Adobe Illustrator video brought to you as always by tutvid.com. If you're new around here, my name is Nathaniel Dodson, and today we're going to take a look at creating this really cool floating cube effect in Adobe Illustrator. It was a really cool app icon that I saw in the App Store and thought, I got to make a video on how this is done, or at least my best approximation of it. And that's what we're going to do here. Now, today's video, it is being sponsored by my good friends over at Skillshare.com, where you can go to learn pretty much anything about design and photography and business and a whole lot of other stuff. Really high quality, really cool stuff they've got. You can use the link I've got down in the description. First 150 people to head over there get 2 months of Skillshare for free. You should check it out. They support us. They appreciate what we do, and I appreciate them for helping us out here on the channel. With all that out of the way, let's jump into this tutorial and get started. Okay, well, here we are in Adobe Illustrator. We're going to kick this whole process off by going File, New to create a new document. And I'm going to go with a 2560 by 1440 document. It's just my favorite size right now. I'm going to go ahead and hit Create. I'm also going to go Window and open up the Swatches panel here, and I'm going to create 3 quick swatches. I have here in my color panel, it's set to RGB. You can do that through the flyout menu, RGB. And I want to be able to use the hexadecimal input here, so I'm going to go CE4F57. That's my first color, and I can just drag this swatch and drop it in my swatches panel. The next color that I'm looking for is D57869. And then I can drag this swatch and drop it in my swatches panel. And the last color here is going to be E9C29E. And you can see it's just kind of this pale, almost a pale salmon color. Those 3 colors right there, that's what I want. I'm going to be using them in a gradient here. And we're going to create that rectangle by selecting the rectangle tool, clicking a single time, and saying we want this rectangle to be 2560 by 1440, which is the size of our document, of course. Now, this rectangle has just the last used color as the fill, but we also have this stroke. I don't want a stroke, so I'm going to bring the stroke to the front here in my toolbar, hit the little slash to get rid of it, and then I want to align this to the middle of my document. I have my Align panel opened here, and I'm simply going to align the horizontal and vertical centers just like so. Then what I'll do, I'll select the fill swatch in my Properties panel, and I'm going to select the black to white gradient here just to fill it with a gradient, and then I'm going to hit Gradient Options. It's going to pop open my gradient panel, which I have here, and the first thing I think I'll do is set the angle. Let's go like 90 degrees, something like that, and let's begin dragging our colors in from the swatches panel. So I'm going to begin with the really flat red, and then let's go for the more middle color, and then sort of that salmony color at the top, just kind of like that. Now I'm going to select the middle color stop in my gradient editor and just set the location to exactly 50%, just like that. Then I'm going to select the sort of brick red color. I'm going to set the location to 25%, just going to push the red up a little bit. And then for the sort of peachy, pale salmon color, I'm going to set the, I'm sorry, not the opacity, we want to set the location here to 75%. Something like that is pretty much exactly what we want. All right, I'm going to close my swatches panel here. I'm going to go ahead and make my thumbnails a little bit larger by going to the panel options for my layers panel, and here in other, I'll maybe make it 100 pixels, a little easier to see, right? I'm going to name this layer artwork, something like that, and I'm going to open this up, and I'm just going to lock the rectangle that is our background. So right in that little space between the eyeball and the colored bar, hit the little lock icon to lock that up. Now we're going to create our little cube. So grab the rectangle tool and click a single time, and we're going to make a 95 pixel by 95 pixel square. I'm going to fill this with any color. I want it to be a solid color just for the sake of not being distracted. So I'm going to select the solid color swatch here in my toolbar, and maybe I'll make it like pink or something, just so it very, very contrasty against our background. I'm going to zoom in on it a little bit here. And then I'm going to go Object, Transform, and choose Shear. You see that right there? Shear. I'm going to tick on Preview. I'm going to set the axis to vertical, and I'm going to set the shear angle here to 22 degrees. I'll hit OK. And now here's where things get fun. We're going to go Effect, Distort and Transform, and choose to transform this. I'm going to say Transform. Let's choose to move this horizontally 95 pixels. That's the width of our little square. I'm going to choose to reflect it along the axis, the x-axis, excuse me. That's going to flip it right over. I'm going to choose to preview this. You're going to see it's going to look like it's giving me this flipped shape. But I'm going to say, look, give me 1 copy. And now you're going to see we have the same shape duplicated and flipped over. I'll hit OK. Now, part of the issue is I want separate faces, and we're getting this weird bounding box because this is just an effect that's applied through the appearance panel here. Here's how we kind of do something with this. We're going to go Object, and we're going to choose Expand Appearance. And now within this group, you're going to see we have our 2 shapes. I don't even want it grouped up, though, so I'm going to go Object and choose Ungroup. And we have 2 separate pieces of perfectly aligned artwork just like that. All right, it's time to go and turn on Smart Guides by going View and make sure Smart Guides are ticked on. Then grab the pen tool, and we're going to draw exactly where the top edge of our shape is. Smart Guides are going to allow us to drop a path exactly on those anchor points, and see it's just snapping right to that anchor point. So it's saying, yep, we'll create a little triangular shape that exactly fits into that little area. If I deselect it, you can see it looks perfect. So we're going to grab just the top part, and just for the sake of making it a little more visible, let's change the color a little bit. I want to do a little duplicate and flip job on this like we did with the two sides of the cube. So we actually want to flip this upward, right? Because we want to complete the top side of our cube. Now the important number to note here is whatever your properties panel is telling you the height value of this triangle is, 38.382. We want to remember that here. So we're going to go Effect, and we're going to hit Transform again. You don't want to say Apply Transform. We want to just hit Transform. That's going to open the Transform dialog box for us again. We don't want to move this horizontally. Let's turn on Preview. You can see that's what we've got so far. Not at all what we want. Go horizontal. Nope, we don't want that. We want to move this vertically. We want to move it vertically 38.382. Watch what happens here. 38.382. It's actually going to push it downward exactly how we want, but we want it to move upward. So we just need to say, look, negative 38.382. And we're going to say, no, we don't need you to reflect X. We need you to reflect along the Y. There you go. And of course, we're making one copy, and we're going to hit OK. Now, once more, we'll go Object. We'll say Expand Appearance. Now, this is grouped together. I don't really care about that. I want to use my Pathfinder here and just unite this, make it one shape. And you can see, there we go. We've got one nice path. It's the top of our little box, and life is good. So let's apply some sort of warm grays to our box. Again, I'm using the RGB in my color panel. I'm going to use the hexadecimal code here. For the top of the cube, I'm going to 6A, 5F, 5E. So you can see a nice gray. It's just slightly warm. For the left side of the cube, I'm going to select that here. We're going to go, double-click there. I'm going to go 644F50. And then for the right side of the cube, I'm going to go 5B, 4646, something like that. So you can see we've got a nice gray cube. All the sides are shaded slightly differently, shadow side, front, and it's looking good. Now we want to add the sort of light to the cube to make it look a little bit more realistic. We're going to grab all three sides of the cube. They're not grouped together. I don't think I even want to group them together right now. We're going to go Edit Copy, and then Edit Paste in Front. You can see now we just have 6 pieces of cube because these 3 are pasted exactly in front. I'm going to select the top of the cube, and we're going to apply a gradient to it. So we're just going to click on the gradient swatch here. Now it gives us this funky gradient. We don't want that. So from the drop-down menu here, I'm going to choose, give me a black to white gradient. There we go. And what we'll do here is select the black point of the gradient. Let's make it white because we want a white to white gradient. The gradient over here on the left, we're going to reduce the opacity to 40%. See that effect that we're creating? And the gradient over here on the right, we're going to reduce the opacity to 0%. So now we're creating this kind of cool fading off effect. I'm going to go ahead and set the angle of the gradient to 90 degrees. And then I'm going to use my gradient slider, the top one here, and I'm going to just slide it back until the location of it is about 20%. So it's just really going to constrain that highlight to the front corner of the box like that. And now what I'll do, I'll select the piece of the cube that's on the front left, and I'm just going to use my eyedropper tool. I'm going to sample that gradient off the top, and I'm just going to change the angle here to 55 degrees, just like that. And we'll do the same thing here for the front right side. We're going to sample that gradient from the top. This time, we're not going to set the angle to 55 degrees. We're going to go like 135, and there we go. So now we have these nice little highlights that we've added to our cube to just give the cube some added realism. At this point, we can grab our highlights. I'm just shift-clicking the little circles in the Layers panel. We'll go Object, Group those together, and we'll name this Highlights. And we'll do the same thing here for the sides of the cube, the gray sides that is. Object, Group them together, and we'll name this group Cube. Now, it's a little difficult, obviously, to see the highlights because they're just white gradients that are appearing over a white background in our Layers panel, but just know that they are definitely 100% there. All right, let's take a quick break here. I want to just set a minute aside and talk about Skillshare.com. They help support my channel, so if you're in the market to get smarter and better at the creative stuff you're doing, I'd love for you to check them out. Whether you're looking to take your side hustle to the next level, maybe master photography, graphic design, videography, or marketing, Skillshare, they got you covered. How? Well, they've got 19,000 courses on a variety of topics like photography, videography, business, and design. I've had Skillshare for a little while, and one of the courses that I've been digging and I've just really loved is Logo Design with Draplin, Secrets of Shape, Type, and Color, done by Aaron Draplin. If you haven't seen this guy, you're really missing out. He's a character. He's funny. He's pretty cool. I also really liked a course called Street Photography, Capturing the Life of Your City by an artist called Trash Hand. It's telling stories, finding great photos in your surroundings, and a whole bunch more. If you're into photography, you'll you'll really like it. A Skillshare membership costs about $10 a month, but Skillshare has got a hookup for the tutvid viewers. First 150 of you that use the link in the description of this video, you get 2 months of Skillshare for free. So please consider checking out and supporting them. They support us. Thanks, Skillshare.com. We love you so much. Now let's get back to the tutorial. All right, so now we want to create sort of the pillar that this cube is going to be floating above. So grab the cube group, and we're going to copy it and paste it behind. So we'll go Edit, Copy, and then Edit, Paste, and Back. Up here in my Properties panel, I want to make sure I lock and constrain the width and height proportions. So I'm going to make sure that's turned on. And I'm going to change the width from 190 pixels to, let's go 310. So now we have this giant box. Don't worry, we don't have the highlights following us. That's totally fine. Let's select this group here, and let's just hold down Shift and nudge this downward, just really until it looks good. Probably something like that, just to the point where if we were to add a shadow now, it would definitely look like the smaller cube is floating above this larger cube beneath it. Let's go ahead and colorize this cube. So I'm going to select the cube here on the bottom. Maybe we'll ungroup it. So we'll go Object, Ungroup. We can always group it back up later, but this will just make it easier to select individual shapes. I'm going to grab the top, and I'm going to fill this with a red. The red that I want is D9 4C. So you can see it's kind of this almost flat red. I'm going to go to the left of the cube. The color I want here on the left side is BA3837. And then for the right side here, what I want is B43635. So slightly different shades of red. Again, we have the lightest surface on the top, the middle brightness here on the left, and the darkest side on the right, just kind of mimicking our small cube. Now let's go ahead and select the top of the pillar cube, right? The cube that's going to be underlying this whole thing. And I'm going to go Object and say Path, and I want to offset this path. I'm going to turn on preview just so I can see what's going on here. I want to actually punch this inward, so I'm going to offset it like -15 pixels. See, I'm pushing that diamond shape inward. Yep, that looks good. I'm going to hit OK. I'm going to change the fill to solid white. I'm going to hit the white color swatch here in the color panel. Now we can really see what's going on there. And I want to offset this again. So I'm going to go Object Path, Offset Path. Note also when you use Offset Path, Illustrator's automatically copying the path. Like our red shape is still underneath. We've just added the white shape. So when we offset this -10, all we're going to be doing here is adding another white shape to the middle. So now we have 2 white shapes there. And I can see over here in my Layers panel, sure enough, I've got 2 paths that are both the white shapes. So I'm going to grab both these by shift-clicking the circles for those layers. And then I'm going to use the minus front option in the Pathfinder here in my Properties panel. And I've just got this perfect little like diamond light ring. The idea is going to be that this ring is going to have light shooting up out of it that's causing this cube to levitate above the pillar. And because we're going to have all this light business going on, let's select the red shape. Let's apply a little inner glow to it. So we're going to go Effect, Stylize, Inner Glow. The inner glow in Illustrator, honestly, it's not the greatest, and maybe we'd be best suited creating a series of gradients to make a really cool inner glow, but we don't have time for that right now. This tutorial is going to be long enough, so let's just go ahead and kind of hack this in with a standard inner glow, but you could use something like the technique we used for the cube. We're going to go Mode Normal here. We're going to make sure our color is just a solid white. And then I'm going to go with a very subtle glow, 15% opacity, and maybe like 10% in the blur department. And I'm going to hit OK. And you can see we've just added that little glow around the edge of the top part of our pillar. All right, let's zoom out just a touch. And I'm going to grab my direct selection tool. That's the white arrow. I'm going to drag a selection over the bottom of both of the sides of the lower cube. So what's happening here is I'm just selecting the anchor points down here at the bottom. See how they're all solid, but the ones at the top are still like hollow looking? Those ones aren't selected. Because what I want to do now is hold down my Shift key and tap with the down arrow key to nudge downward and expand this pillar. So I want to expand it quite a bit. You really can't expand it too much. I mean, unless you just go ridiculously crazy with it. We're going to end up masking this off just to kind of shorten it and clean things up. I just want to give ourselves plenty of artwork to play with and work with as we move forward. So let's grab our black selection arrow. We're going to select all of these shapes now, and I'm going to go Object Group, and we're going to name this group Pillar. Now that we have it grouped up, it's going to be just a total piece of cake to add a layer mask to this group. Here in the transparency panel, you have the ability to add a layer mask. So we just double click this little thumbnail. It fills with black. I don't really want that. I'm going to say uncheck the clip, and then I'm going to create a rectangle. So I'm going to say rectangle, I don't know, right about there is probably great. We're going to apply a gradient. We're going to say a black to white gradient. Now the default black to white gradient, the black is not really solid black. See how it's kind of like a little bit brighter than deep, rich black? We want rich black. And then we're going to go ahead and make this like -90. And what I'm going to do here to control the gradient is just start dragging the black slider up, right? Or the black gradient stop upward, and just, you know, create the fade that I want. So something kind of, I don't know, Right around there is probably good. Maybe I'll expose a little bit more of the pillar. Something like that's probably good. Grab the black arrow. Go ahead and select the pillar artwork thumbnail in the transparency panel to exit the layer mask, and we have a nice fade applied to our pillar. While we're working with the pillar, let's go ahead and create just sort of some pillars that are standing in the fog and the mist around this pillar to add some ambiance to our artwork. So let's grab the entire pillar group and we'll duplicate it. Let's go Edit, Copy. And we can just say Edit Paste. It really doesn't have to be pasted in place. It can just be pasted wherever on our artboard. I'm going to get rid of the mask in the transparency panel so I can select it and hit the release button. You can see I've got this big piece of gradient artwork now that's been released. I'm going to delete that because I don't want that. And I'm going to select the pillar, and I'm going to set the width of the pillar here in the transform area of my properties panel. I'm going to set it to like 65 pixels. We're still maintaining proper proportions, so you're going to see this is going to make this pretty small. I want this to be a bit bigger because I want this to almost look like pillars that are in the background. So I'm going to use my direct selection arrow. I'm going to grab the bottom points on this. I'm going to drag straight downward, holding down Shift just to make sure it remains a perfectly straight line. Don't worry if it's super duper long like this. We're going to end up masking this in place as well. And I'm going to bring this over and just start putting stuff in place. I'm going to maybe add a tall pillar there. We'll stack this properly as well. Don't worry that it's on top of the artwork. I'm going to hold down Alt or Option. I'll maybe drag out another one of these that's like here. And I'm going to drag one over, hold down Shift, and place it sort of over here. The spacing, nothing has to be perfectly exact. We're just kind of lining things up. We're going to use the alignment features in a little bit to kind of get all this exactly how we want it. I'm going to hold down Alt or Option and drag out another copy of this, maybe drop it there. Hold down Alt or Option. I'm going to hold down Shift to drag it straight across. There we go, something like that. And I'm going to duplicate one of these just by Alt or Option, dragging it out. And I'm going to set the width of this one to 40 pixels. So we've got some smaller towers now. And I'm going to place some of these in the middle. So maybe I'll put this one here. I'm going to Alt or Option, drag a copy of that over there. I'm going to Alt or Option, drag a copy down like here. Maybe drag a piece over here. And then I'm going to make a couple tiny towers here. So I'm going to make these, I don't know, maybe like 25 pixels wide, something like that. I'm going to drag these little suckers right in here. Maybe I'll make them a little bit shorter, something like that. And then Alt or Option, drag a copy of that over there. So it's pretty symmetrical, all things considered. Let's zoom out a little bit. We want to select all these pillars because we can really group these up in just a minute. But what I want to do, I want to lock up the big pillar, the highlights, and the cube, and the pillar on the bottom. That way, if I drag a selection over everything, we get all of our shapes and we don't accidentally select or not select anything we want. Now you can see the big pillar in the middle not being selected. That's because I accidentally locked that up in the layers as well. Let's unlock that. And there we go. We have everything selected. Now these are going to be behind our floating cube. So right off the bat, we can just drag them behind. Now, real quick, I'm going to collapse the Properties panel by double-clicking the tab. All of these layers are going to be behind our main pillar and floating cube. So we're going to just shift-click all of these layers here in the Layers panel like that, and I'm going to drag them down below. So the only thing they're going to be on top of is our background, just like that. And you can see I left one pillar up there. The thumbnail has not yet refreshed, but that layer mask is gone. There you go. You can see it's our main central pillar. And what I want to do before we group this up and mask it, I think I'm going to reduce opacity of some of these pillars. So let's grab like the main pillars that are going to sort of reside in the front. And I'm going to go to my transparency panel and reduce the opacity of these. I just shift-clicked all of them. We're going to reduce the opacity to 40%. And then all the little guys in here, we're going to take these suckers and reduce the opacity to like, I don't know, let's go 25%. And then maybe like the little tiny ones, we'll knock them down even further. We'll maybe make them like 18%, something like that. Now, I want these to be a little bit closer together, so I'm going to take the outermost pillars and I'm going to nudge them inward just using my right arrow key. I'm holding down Shift as well, something like that. I'll nudge them in a little bit, and then we'll select all of these. And in our Align panel, so that's right here, well, it's here in my workspace. If you don't have it, you can go Window and just open up your Align panel, no biggie. We're going to make sure that we distribute the horizontal spacing. So you can see horizontal distribute centers, or center, I should say. It's basically going to make sure that everything is spaced equally. Now you can see something crazy happen. That's not actually what I wanted. What happened there is my Align to was still set to Align to Artboard, so it horizontally distributed all that artwork from one side of the artboard to the other. We actually want to do it just within our selection. And I'm going to hit that again, and you can see it just makes sure everything is lined up and spaced nice and evenly, just the way that we want it. And you can look at it and say, you know what, it's kind of still too spaced out for me. So I'm going to take this outer one, I'm going to nudge it inward a bit more, I'm going to take this side, nudge it inward a bit more, something like that. Let's select everything again and just distribute those shapes. There we go. Probably something like that. Maybe I'm nitpicking at this point. I do this all the time. Let's select all these. Let's distribute. There we go. Something more like that. We want it to look almost like a city sort of is going on back there. So we can select all of these tall pillars. Remember, everything in the foreground is locked up. So we're just selecting all these pillar shapes. And we can go Object Group to group these up. And at this point, apply a nice layer mask. Now, I want to apply a rounded mask to this to further give the impression that these shapes are sort of wrapping around our central piece of artwork here. So select that group. Let's go ahead and double click on that thumbnail in the transparency panel to add a mask. We're going to unclip the mask. We want to see everything. And let's create a nice ellipse. I'm going to hold down Shift and just drag out a perfect ellipse. And what we're going to do here is in the gradient panel, I'm going to say, hey, look, none of this really matters. Let's go with our just default black to white. Let's say radial gradient. And we're going to take the black handle, and we know that we need to make it that solid, rich black, so we're going to drag that. And then what I'm going to do is take this circle and drag it over the artwork just to kind of get an idea of what I'm working with. So right now, the outer edges of the circle are black, you can see. So that's the stuff that's being hidden. So the first thing I'm going to do is say, hey, look, reverse the gradient. So it's going to make the inner part black and the outer part white. And then I'm going to hold down Alt-Option. I'm going to drag my ellipse out this way. And we're going to say, look, I want there to be more black. I want to hide more of this stuff. Maybe I'll pull down a little bit here, make sure that we're covering all this stuff down here. Start covering what we want covered. Let me pull this down a little bit. And let's increase the spread of the black. Let's bring this up like that. Maybe I'll pull this off a little. Something kind of like that. And we can see how now we have this nice fade for these shapes that almost looks like it's wrapping around our central column. And then I can just select my artwork thumbnail in the transparency panel, get out of there, and we have all of our nice pieces of artwork that are lined up and in place. And I should also mention real quickly, you could go into the group, let's say if you don't like the spacing between some of these, like the fact that there's so much space between this little one and the big one next to it, you could go in and start selecting these guys individually and nudging them around or moving them. Just remember how much you move one way or another and, create whatever you want to create. It's really up to you. So it's just one thing to think about. For the sake of saving whatever time I can in this tutorial, I'm not going to do that here, but it's something you can do. All right, let's lock up those groups or those shapes in that group, and I'm going to call this city. And now we're going to move along to something that's kind of cool. We're going to duplicate our highlights cube here. So I'm going to grab it and just drag it right down to the new layer icon in my layers panel. I'm going to unlock it. Remember, everything else is locked up. So if I drag a selection over this, we're only selecting the highlights. And I want to ungroup this. Go Object, Ungroup. And the piece on top, we don't need. So I'm just going to select it and delete it. The pieces on the side, I do want. So I'm going to make sure I save them, number one. And number two, I'm going to Shift Select and click both of them to select both of them. See, I got them both selected. I'm going to open my Properties panel back up. And I want to change the width here to 230. So I'm going to say 230. It's going to just bump them out, make them a bit bigger. And I'm going to nudge them downward because I kind of want them to meet up exactly with the edge of my sort of square light strip, if you will. So I'm going to nudge downward and just nudge it down until it looks about right. That looks pretty good. And now what we'll do with our gradient is we do want this to be white to transparent, but I think I want the white here on the bottom. I'm going to bump the opacity up to 100. Let's see what that looks like. That's pretty good. But I want the light itself, I want it to extend up beyond the top of this cube. See, if I deselect, we are definitely getting that kind of light shining up from the bottom effect, but I want it to be even more drastic. So we're going to grab our direct selection tool and drag a selection across the top, right? Because everything else is locked up, we can just drag a rough selection and just get all these anchor points on the top of our sort of wall of light. We haven't selected the ones on the bottom. Hold down Shift and just nudge upward with the up arrow key, and you can see we can create this really cool glowing effect that now appears to be traveling way up past our box. Now we can select each individual side and play with the angle. Maybe we want to bump this to like 75, make it appear a little bit more straight up, and maybe on this side we could push it to like 105, something like that. Make it appear just a little more straight up than it was, and that's kind of a cool effect. If I back out, we can see the effect that's been created. Kind of neat. We don't even need to worry about back walls of light. You could create those if you want, but I think this looks pretty solid the way it is now. What I'll do is just select both of these sides and group them up, Object Group, and we can name this Glow or something like that. I'm going to lock it up just because we're going to do something else here, and I want to be able to select a bunch of stuff without selecting and wrecking other stuff we've done. I'm going to grab the Paintbrush tool. So the Paintbrush tool typically is going to draw like a big path and create this shape, and you can see we don't want that at all. We're going to apply a bunch of dots here around the base of this pillar, and I'm going to go ahead and just start painting dots around down here. And just create a series of dots. There's not much to say. They're just dots. And you can use your square bracket keys. Those are the little brackets next to the letter P on your keyboard, on just the traditional English keyboard. The square brackets, the right square bracket to make bigger dots, and we can add some of those down here, right? So this is sort of like the origin, if you will, of all these little sparkle things flying up. And then the left square bracket to make it much smaller, and maybe we have some smaller dots that are sort of sparking off of the bigger sparky sparks that we have shooting up from the bottom. You can play with this as much or as little as you like. Make a couple like sort of medium-sized ones in there. And really, if you go crazy like I'm going now, it usually ends up not looking all that great. Just fair warning here. But sometimes it's hard to resist. I'm going to grab the dots here. I'm going to nudge these over just a little bit to give more of an impression that it's wrapping around our pillar instead of just kind of hanging out there in outer space. Next, what I want to do is select all of these dots and go Object, Expand Appearance, because technically we're not even messing with the fill. We're only painting with a stroke here using that brush tool, but I want to turn these into fills. So the easiest way to do that is just Object, Expand Appearance, and now we have shapes with no fill, which is great. And I'm going to change that fill to like a very light buttery yellow, something like that. And if I deselect, we can see all the dots. I'm actually going to select once more. We're going to group these up. We're going to go Object Group. And I want to apply a little bit of masking here. So we're going to go to the Transparency panel, double-click to create our mask. We're going to unclip the mask as we've been doing. We're going to create 2 quick masks, I think. I'm going to grab the Ellipse tool first and just hold down Shift and drag out a nice circular shape. So something right about there. And let's go with our default black to white. We'll select the black color stop as we've been doing. Go rich black with that sucker. We're going to set this to, not a line. We're going to set it to a radial gradient. There we go. And that's not going to look very good. We want to just reverse that gradient. There we go, something like that. And then I'm going to begin dragging black in until I'm really seeing it, being faded there at the edges. Because the idea isn't to make the stars completely disappear. It's just to change the opacity of some of them, give the illusion that they are sort of disappearing. And now it'll just be a matter of making some of the stars at the base here go away a little bit. So let's use our rectangle tool for that. Maybe we'll just create a simple gradient like this. I'm going to select this. This is not going to be a radial, but rather a linear gradient. I'm going to drag the black back. Now we can see the effect that it's already having. Let's just increase the white by dragging sort of the containing slider over a little bit. I'm going to bring blacks up a little bit more and then drag the white back into it. And of course, you may be noticing that the effect is fading here in the middle, and that's because we don't yet have an angle applied to this. So it's good to do that, guys. We'll drag the black point back up. Sometimes I get caught up in the details. There we go, something like that. And then we'll go ahead and select the thumbnail there for the transparency panel to get back to our regular artwork editing mode. Okay, so you may be thinking, well, surely we're almost done, and we are. You could be done at this point, frankly, but I want to take it a step further. What I'm going to do is I'm going to first turn on, well, you know what? We'll select all of this artwork, and of course I need to unlock it, right? Let's name this. Let's name it Sparks, this group of stuff we just created. I'm going to collapse properties for just a quick second. I'm going to unlock all my artwork, and we're going to group it all together. So I'm just going to grab it, and we're going to go Object, Group. Now, because everything is kind of expanding and it's huge and things like that, we could try to align this to the artboard in a somewhat standard fashion, but it's probably not going to work as well as you might expect. Side to side, it aligns nicely, but top to bottom, we probably just want to manually drag it down and say, the middle's probably somewhere right around there. Maybe I'll nudge it upward just a kiss from there. There we go, something like that, I think. And now, before we mask this off to create our icon effect, we're going to add some grain, and this is going to add so much realism to the artwork and what we're creating here. It's really, really cool what this does. So let's go ahead here and simply create another rectangle. So I'm just going to click with the rectangle. 2560 by 1440 again is fine. Just cover up the whole document just so we have all of our bases covered. And let's align this, just make sure we get it right in place. And I'm going to fill this with a 50% gray, which is 128 across the board here for RGB. 128, 128, 128. That's your 50% gray. Or, at least it's close enough. We're going to go Effect here, and I'm going to go Artistic. I'm going to choose Film Grain, and it's going to open up the big Filter Gallery dialog here. And we can see we've got all this grain. So under Film Grain, I'm just going with 10 grain, 0 highlight, 10 intensity. Looks good to me. I'm going to hit OK. Illustrator's going to take a second to process it. It's a big old filter that we're applying here. And what I'll do at this point, let's zoom into 100%. With this grain rectangle, I'm going to set it to the blend mode of Soft Light. And you can see we have this heavy grain effect, probably too much, so I'll reduce the opacity down to 35% feels right. And there we have just some nice grain texture applied to this vector artwork. Now we can go ahead and create our mask. All right, I'm going to apply the mask to the overall artwork layer because I want to mask the background. I want to mask everything. So I'm going to make sure that first deselect everything and then just select the entire layer by hitting that little circle. And to this layer, we want to add our mask. So here in the transparency panel, we'll double click in the open thumbnail area. I'm going to unclip this, and I'm going to grab my rounded rectangle tool. I'm going to click a single time. I'll drag my dialog over. I want to create a 512 by 512 rectangle, and I'm going to give it 100 pixel rounded corners. So the corner radius is the amount of roundedness on those corners. Then I'll hit OK. We're going to make sure we fill this rectangle with solid white. So I'm just going to go ahead here and select the solid white swatch. And you can see it doesn't look like anything's changed. Before we do anything, let's just align this to the middle of our artboard. And you can see that's not really where we want the mask. We want the mask to be showing a good piece of our artwork. But really, before we go any further, I should probably go ahead and clip the mask again. It's just my habit to go in and immediately unclip. But now we can see what the icon would look like. So we have this helpful little center dot. What I think I'll do is I'll set that center dot like maybe halfway up the middle of the cube. So let's nudge it over, and then I'm holding down Shift and nudging up. Maybe something, yeah, something right around there. That looks pretty right, don't you think? Something like that. Once you have the position of the rounded rectangle set and you like it, notice too, by the way, like the buildings are not the same in the background. So those could be moved one way or the other. I kind of like the fact that it's off kilter a little bit. No city is perfectly symmetrical, right? Some things are off balance a little bit. But of course you could go in, and we could go in after this and adjust it. I'll show you in a second. But once you have your rounded rectangle in place, select the rounded rectangle and go Edit, Copy. All right, now what we do, back here in the transparency panel, we're still in mask mode. We want to get back to artwork editing mode. And I want to paste that rounded rectangle on top of this. So here we are, we're in our artwork layer. We're going to go Edit, and I'm going to choose Paste in Front. Now you can see, uh-oh, what happened to everything? Well, we just pasted a solid white rectangle on top of everything. That's what happened. So select that solid white rounded rectangle. We're going to get rid of the fill here. So I'm going to say, yep, get rid of the fill. And I'm going to go to the stroke. I want to apply a stroke here. Let's use our Properties panel. Double click to open up the Properties panel here. For the stroke, let's apply... Let's try 1 point. Now, let's try 2 points. We can always reduce the opacity a little bit. 2 points. And the important thing here is I want to align the stroke to the inside. Because remember, if it falls outside, well, that's masked off so we can't see it. And then for the color of the stroke, right now it's white. We want to go with the solid black. I'll click over here in my Properties panel. I can deselect, and we can see that we have this solid black border. Is it a little too heavy? Probably, but that's easy to change. We can go opacity and push it back to 45–50%, and there we go, just a nice dark border around our icon. Now, I did mention a second ago, we might want to adjust those buildings in the background. So we can open up our artwork group, of course. We can select the city buildings, and we can nudge them side to side. We can push it over. Maybe like there is probably about centered up, something like that. That looks decent. But I don't know. I kind of like when it's off balance a little bit. Maybe something like that. That's kind of interesting. Just makes it look like it's just the way it should be. Well, that's going to just about wrap it up for this one. What a journey it was. If you made it this far, don't shut the video off yet. If you created this piece of artwork, I would absolutely love to see it. Consider uploading it to your Instagram. Tag me in the image. My Instagram handle is @tutvid, Tutvid. I try to like and comment on everything I'm tagged in, especially artwork that has been created from tutorials that I've made. It's just really cool to see the stuff that the good people are making when they follow the tutorials that I'm putting out on YouTube. It's really cool to see. I'll just put it to you that way. It's really cool. So for creating this piece of graphical artwork, the isometric design with shape after shape after shape after shape, and gradient after gradient after gradient after gradient, and everything else that goes into creating this really cool little piece of artwork, ladies and gentlemen, that's it. Get it, got it, good. Nathaniel Dodson, tutvid.com. I'll catch you in the next one. And before you go, make sure you subscribe to my channel for more great tutorials every day. Also, buy my course. It helps us do what we do, and this channel is supported by viewers just like you. You can also just click the thumbnail and watch another video from this channel. See you next time, guys.